opened up. Naturally, work came across, and then when sort of the rumour got out that I started on my own, that the work sort of followed. And I think we went from 20 to 25 down to maybe 7 or 8 of us in the end at the lowest point. You know, we take on clients based on the good service that we provide. Yeah. And it's organically grown from there, really. But it's completely different. Back in 2006, I literally did everything from the banking to the wrapping the post, opening the post, to doing all the conveyancing.
Hello, Stuart Forsdike. Thanks for coming onto the podcast. It's great to have you.
No problems. How you doing? You right?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. So we've known each other for about 5 years now. When I started my first job, when I was at eMove, we started working together then, and then as I started my first business, we were also working together then. So it's a friendship that we've sort of developed along the way, and it's been really interesting seeing, I guess, your growth as a company and seeing how you manage it and how you run that, because it's a really sizable company that you have. And I'd love to talk about your story, how you got there, and the beginnings of it. So talk about why did you start PCS Legal? How did it all come about?
So at the time, I was working for another large firm of solicitors in Essex, and we were sort of entering into a different era with emails and the internet and so on and so forth. You know, people think, oh, we've had the internet and emails forever, but, you know, sort of 15, 20 years ago, we didn't use it anywhere near as much, and it was literally only just coming onto the scene. So I was working away, billing lots, taking on lots of new clients, so on and so forth, and it got to a point where I thought, hang on a minute, you know, this company's not looking forward. I was being told things couldn't be done in a certain way, and I thought, well, no, they definitely can. It's a new era. We need to embrace technology and move forward with it. They didn't want to, and I thought, well, okay, I'll go and open up my own practice, my own firm of licensed conveyancers, doing the same kind of thing, and take all the good points of that company and hopefully put some better points into it and make it bigger and better.
Amazing. So looking at PCS Legal today, it's hard for me to imagine you on your own doing the legal work and growing it to that big. Was it just yourself that started it? How was the initial starting of the firm?
So I can remember literally one day just sitting in the office when I was at the previous firm, thinking, no, you know, the time's come, I'm going to take the plunge. And I remember going in, hand my notice in, I got put on garden leave straight away, had a couple of months to chill out and relax. Then it was just full steam ahead. And I can remember taking a serviced office about 3 miles down the road from where I am now. Yeah. And the rest is history. So I started off in a room probably about 20 foot by 20 foot, just on my own for a month. And then the assistant that I had previous working for me, she came across and joined. And myself and Denise probably ran the practice for maybe 6 months like that.
Really?
And I would say sort of every month we employed an extra member of staff, got up to around about 20, 25, something like that. And then in sort of 2008, the recession kicked in. So it was a bit of a rethink then.
So how did you manage in the initial stages of the firm? Was it just trying to get in as much work as possible? Was you bringing on new agents, or was you just getting individuals, or how did that look?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that I decided to open and stay in Basildon was because back in the day, a lot of the work was local. So I already had a reputation from local estate agents, knew lots of local mortgage advisors and developers. So naturally, the work would come across if I did a good job still. So on that basis, we just opened up. Naturally, work came across, and then when sort of the rumour got out that I started on my own, the work sort of followed. And in that market, it was relatively easy, dare I say. The competition wasn't as hot insofar as now. We have competition that's probably 10 miles down the road, and we have competition that's 100 miles down the road. So it was a slightly different market sort of 16 years ago.
Yeah. And how did you find it the first 6 to 12 months? What was that like?
Lonely.
Yeah.
Very, very, very lonely. You question, what am I doing? Have I made the right decision? And the enormity of what you're doing really hits in when you're sitting in that office at Christ knows what time at night on your own, slaving away over the files. And back then, you did absolutely everything. So you opened a physical file, you wrote the name of the client on the front of the file, you typed each email, wrote each letter, wrapped each envelope, put a stamp on each letter. You did everything right from the scratch, right from the start, right through to the very end. sending the client a copy of their new title document. So yeah, it was literally every single thing. We didn't have a receptionist, didn't have an office junior. Myself and Denise did absolutely the lot.
Something that I hear a lot as well is when, I think I might have had a conversation with you before actually, you said that when it was sort of, I guess, back in the day, it was it more enjoyable? But things, obviously things are different, you know, with the introduction of technology and everything like that. I hear quite a lot that it was better back in the day.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I mean, was it more enjoyable? I'd say it probably was, yeah. I think the remit of what we do was more defined then. So people often, I think probably through poor education, don't really understand what we do. And that poor education isn't individual, it's maybe from our industry in terms of educating home buyers and home sellers what we actually do. I think we become a bit more of a moving process centre rather than an actual conveyancing outfit. You know, we look at legal title, and we should be really advising the client as to the legalities of buying and selling houses, not the practicalities. But of course, as time moves on, and as our service differs, and to, you know, stay ahead of the game, if you like, you know, our offering has to get bigger, has to get better. And now that includes, you know, absolutely everything. So we're trying to help out the client as much as possible. But going back in time, where everything was a lot more traditional, you know, you didn't have online estate agents, for example. You know, everything was local high street. So the clients would really have their hand held by the agent, by the surveyor, by the removal company. And we would literally concentrate on conveyancing and conducting legal work. And also, if you go back that length of time, there was a lot more unregistered title, which you don't come across anywhere near as much as you did, say, you know, 15, 16 years ago. So yeah, you could say it was more enjoyable.
Yeah. And so you touched upon the recession in 2008. How did that affect you personally, and then also your firm? Because I can imagine you're on pretty good trajectory to doing quite well. Then obviously that.
Yes, so I'd only ever known, you know, month by month, things getting better and better. You know, more intake in terms of new work, more intake in terms of, or more production of fees and profit. So I'd only known a good time, if you like. And yeah, it was a bit of a shock when it seemed like it was overnight. People started ringing up, we're withdrawing, we've seen an article in the press, we've listened to an interview on the radio, we've seen something on TV, and literally the market plummeted.
Yeah.
And I always thought if there was a recession, I would just go out, I would get work from other agents and so on and so forth. But what I didn't really fully understand is that simply people would not sell and would not buy. So there was no work to go and get. So as a consequence of that, there's no money coming in, there's no new matters, there's no completions. And unfortunately, it means redundancies.
Yeah.
And I think we went from 2025 down to maybe 7 or 8 of us in the end at the lowest point.
Wow.
But we were quite lucky. I think we hadn't grown too big. So that when the recession kicked in, we recovered probably within 12 to 18 months.
Right.
And therefore, where bigger practices still had an ongoing problem, we were able to sort of ride a bit of a wave, cherry pick the decent staff that had all been made redundant. And we hadn't become big enough for it to be a problem. And we were small enough at that point to really capitalise on the market that was out there.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, as riding the wave, because I think, like you say, with some of the bigger companies, when they have something like this hit them, it's a lot harder for them to adapt and change than it is for a smaller firm or a growing firm. And especially within our market as well, like you say, you could cherry pick some solicitors, and unlike a lot of other industries, you can just take a solicitor from another firm and then put them in your firm, and then they can just almost go straight away, can't they? They can obviously adapt to your systems, but they can almost hit the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, most lawyers will be sort of used to different systems and protocols, but in essence, the way you conduct a conveyancing transaction is by and large by the Law Society's protocol. So we all follow a similar process. We might do it slightly differently, but at the end of the day, it is a similar process that we all follow. And that is part of the reason why some of these transactions also take so long, is because us lawyers have to follow that process, have to do things in a certain way. And that's why sometimes we get it in the neck that things take so long. Yeah.
And I think that's a big subject at the moment, because it seems to be getting longer and longer. What do you think firms can do, or what have you been doing to try and reduce the transaction time? Or can you, is it possible to actually, set something in place where you can cut that back?
I think my opinion on this kind of thing is that the amount of work that you have to do will never decrease. It's only increasing.
Right.
The key is to try and get into clients at an earlier stage. So that if you've got, say, 3 months of work here, you can actually start it here, start it at that earlier stage. You're then going to reduce the time from when the client receives an offer or makes an offer to they actually complete. At the moment, the national average is around about 19 weeks. So it's crazy. So 19 weeks is a hell of a long time. But we offer various schemes such as our Fast Move scheme and Express Mover, whereby buyers and sellers instruct us as they're looking or as they're marketing properties, which means they can complete forms and supply ID. We can do their checks and so on and so forth right at the start, which will cut a month off any transaction. And when the time comes, when they've found that dream property or when they've finally sold, it means we're ahead of the game straight away. We can issue contracts. We can start work literally straight away.
Yeah, and that's I think that's part of educating on the process as well. We said earlier about people are uneducated, and it almost as if people don't help the matter. You're the professionals, you're doing the legal work. I can imagine you get calls every day sort of saying what's going on, but if they're educated properly, then I think that helps it overall. But what sort of things can you put in place to educate somebody that is making the biggest move or purchase of their life?
Yeah, it's difficult though, isn't it? Because when you think about it, why would you assume that something will take this length of time to go through? In this day and age with modern technology, why would it take 19 weeks? It's almost inconceivable.
Yeah.
But you do have to bear in mind that from a purchase point of view, you've got a seller, you've got a seller's lawyer, you've got your mortgage broker, you've got your lawyer, you possibly might have a surveyor. You're going to have search companies that chip into the transaction, mortgage companies. The list is endless. You go into the sale, you've got a similar kind of volume of people involved. So it's a bit like a wheel, and there's lots of different spokes to that wheel.
Yeah.
And it only takes one person to slow everything down, and then everybody's affected.
Yeah.
But I still look back now and you think, get out the bubble, and you think, well, why would clients think that it takes 19 weeks? And one of the various things that we do right at the onset is tell clients, look, to manage expectations, our average turnaround is between 10 and 12 weeks. It will take that kind of time for your transaction to get to a point at which it's going to be exchanged and then ultimately complete. So it's important that we tell clients up front and try and manage expectations as much as we possibly can.
And do you think there's firms out there that say we can complete in 6 to 8 weeks to win the business? Do you think there's that sort of thing going on where they're telling the client something different so that they?
Do you know what? No, I don't. I don't think that. No, I think most law firms are fairly honest, and they'll tell clients how long things take.
Yeah.
Whether the introducer of the work is quite so honest, that might be questionable. To get a client over to their chosen lawyer, that they might be slightly exaggerating on how long things take. But equally, even though we talk about, say, 3 months as an average, and the national average being 19, you can get a transaction done within a week, no problem. We've managed to transact with lots of clients in the last sort of month or 6 weeks during this lockdown period, where we've been instructed one day, we've completed the next. But on those kind of circumstances, there's always, or there always is circumstance as to why you can do it that quickly. Yeah. And those circumstances are, well, have you got the money? Yes, I've got it sitting in my UK bank account. I've got the whole money here. I don't need a mortgage. Are you available for me to FaceTime or Zoom you now so we can carry out our ID checks? Have you got everything to hand? Yes, I have. If I send you over a report on the property you're buying, can you look through it now? If I email you contracts, can you sign them now? Can you wire me the deposit now? Can you do this? Can you do this? And if they can, and if you've got a seller's lawyer that's prepared everything well, and equally they can get everything over to you quickly, then yeah, it can be done that quickly. But the circumstances have to fit. And I think it's difficult for the clients when we say, the national average is 19 weeks. We might take, say, 10, 12, 13 weeks, something on those lines. And yet their mate down the pub managed to get it done in a week. That's the difficult part. But the mate down the pub wasn't involved in a chain of 7 properties, so on and so forth. And I think also a big caveat to time's always going to be leasehold properties. Sure. Leasehold properties always take longer. And it's amazing to think, but you could deal with a property worth 100,000 that's a second floor flat somewhere as a comparable a property that's worth 5 million might be a lot easier and certainly a lot quicker to transact on than that 100,000 leasehold property. And again, it's difficult to really sort of think how that is possible, but it is.
I think that's part of the problem, is that every single case has different aspects to it. You know, if you've got a chain, then that significantly impacts the time that it can take. You know, the people involved, like you just said, you've got all the surveyors, you've got the mortgage, you've got everyone else involved. So it's largely reliant on a lot of people, which inherently does normally increase the time it takes. But there's more and more technology being introduced into law firms, and although it can't affect the process, I guess, itself, it can add components to increase it. Have you used technology in your firm to speed up processes, or what have you used technology?
Yeah, definitely. We've invested heavily in technology over the years, and as well as that investment, and as well as sort of complex case management systems that will produce automated reports, etc. There are some real simple gems that we use, simply such as FaceTime and Zoom meetings like this are so easy. You know, I can have a conversation or a meeting with a client, you know, check that they look like the person on their passport and so on and so forth. So there are lots of non-money technology or non-costing technology that we can all use as well. You know, WhatsApp's a great medium for transporting information as well. So there's lots of things we can do that don't cost money, but equally, again, I mean, in this day and age now, we have case trackers where clients can log into systems where they can log in to upload their ID, etc. There's lots of sophisticated systems that the market now has access to, which has definitely improved the slickness of the way we deal with things. But unfortunately, as well as great technology that's out there that has sped things up there, from a compliance point of view, it's got worse. So the red tape that now surrounds these transactions is such that it's had an adverse effect insofar as, yes, there is a protection element, and that's what compliance is there for. But equally, it's meant that the checks we do are much more in-depth than they ever have been before, not just on the property, but on the clients and on the origin of monies, etc. So the red tape that's now involved means that, again, it's exaggerated the length of time things take. So the good tech has sort of half balanced out the you know, the other things that we have to take care of.
That's interesting. I think that the technology will keep on pushing, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. So
one thing I say about technology is it still doesn't answer the phone, and it still doesn't have that conversation with a client. And you know, I always liken technology and buying a house to the key. And, you know, if you buy a house, you get the keys to the property. It's still synonymous, isn't it? You get a key. Whereas most offices and that sort of thing these days, you'll get a number that you punch into a pad and the door opens for you. We don't really have that on our houses yet. We still have that real personal key. And I think that it's unlike a lot of other things that we buy in life, and it's so personal that people will want to speak to the person dealing with it.
Well, there's technology, There's a big reason for it, is that it's, you know, if you're spending more than your wages, you're spending 100,000 to, you know, like you say, 5 million. You're going to want somebody there to speak to. You're not going to want
exactly. Yeah, it can't be faceless. I mean, we've invested loads in technology, but we still run in a fairly sort of old-fashioned ethos that, you know, there are individual property lawyers here at the practice that will have conduct of each individual person's file. So rather than ring up and quote an 11-digit reference and somebody reads an update off a screen, that's not what happens here. You know, we don't have that outsourced work or anything like that. It's all done personally by individual case handlers and property lawyers that look after those clients.
Yeah, and I guess that would be partly due to, you know, the growth of your company and the success it's brought. So that's what I want to talk about, really. Did you, when you started out, what sort of goals did you have? Did you plan on, you know, growing it to this size? How did that all start out? What's your mindset, or was it just sort of jump on and see where it takes me?
Well, I'd love to say that after quarter one, I had this target and we met that. After quarter two, we did this. The quarter three, but the answer is no. I had absolutely no idea. Basically, the recession knocked us back anyway. So sort of 2009, 2010 were almost like we were still at the start. And then we've really organically grown, I suppose. We've never had any investment. Everything's organically grown from what we would hope would be good service. And you know, we take on clients based on the good service that we provide. And it's organically grown from there, really. We'd always had a presence in different areas, or I personally had from sort of living. I used to live in Harlow and Ongar, and used to commute to Basildon, so I had a presence in Basildon, I had a presence in Harlow and Ongar. So we decided to open our second office in that area. We then opened our third office in Wickford, again, as our presence grew in that direction. And then the last few years, we've ventured more and more into the city, more and more into London, dealing with high-end brokers and whatnot. And it just made sense to have a London office to sort of furnish that client type. So the service that we offer could be bespoke for different property types, different client types. So hopefully, it fits. But there was never a real design or business plan to make it of any particular size. It was more a case of wanting to open up, do my own thing, and take it from there. And it's sort of organically grown like this.
I think it's quite rare now that you see that, isn't it? Maybe, I don't know about law firms, but you don't see so many companies that are completely organic. A lot of them do have investment because they almost feel like they need that jump. And I think that's like it's quite a modern or quite a recent thing. People are getting loads and loads of funding into their companies to try and grow. We know, especially in the estate agency market, almost every large online agent is getting all their money from funding.
But I think, Johnny, it was a different world back then. Whether you could do what I did now, highly unlikely.
Really?
Highly unlikely, because I don't think you'd be able to get the coverage and the brand and so on and so forth. Right. Whereas it was a different era. Like I say, when I opened up, I think I might have had a BlackBerry. And we did have emails. And I do remember a few years before saying, God, emails on phones, that will never take off. Why would you want that? But, people don't really realise how recent emails, the internet, iPhones, all that jazz really is.
Yeah.
So, when I opened up, there was hardly any of that. I probably received 5 or 6 emails a day. It was like, an email. It was a bit of an event when one came in. And we were still receiving piles and piles of posts. Back in the day, lots of faxes as well. So whether you could do now what I did then, I think would probably be really unlikely. I think you probably would need the investment to get an established brand and to get that sort of initial influx to work. So it definitely was a different era. And again, I used the word earlier, compliance. To be on lender panels now, that there's such a heavy amount of compliance that you have to go through. I wouldn't envy anybody starting up, not only in the current sort of climate and market, but with the current sort of hoops that you now have to jump through.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with somebody the other day about that. They started their firm a couple of years ago, and they said it was one of their biggest problems or things they had to overcome was getting onto the panels. So do you think, how you looked at phone calls or emails back then? What about cryptocurrency and the crypto in the property moving market? Do you think that's going to play a role in this market?
Personally, I don't think so, but I'm not sure whether the market at the moment would be ready for that.
No.
I think traditionally any kind of money exchange is all done via lawyers. It's all done via a client account to a client account, and is very heavily regulated. Whether there'll be the appetite for that to come on board, I'm not sure in the short term. Long term, then you suggest yes, it would, as sort of the world evolves. But short term, whether there'll be the appetite for it, I'm not quite sure just yet.
Sure. So other than the recession that you went through, have you had any other obstacles that you've had to overcome? I'm sure that you've gone through quite a few, but are there any notable ones that made you better as a company today?
Made us better. I think as the years have gone on, we really struggled to find quality staff. And I suppose maybe 3-4 years, no, probably longer than that, probably 5 years ago, we decided that we would take an influx of guys that were looking to train, and we would give them that training to progress, to become legal secretaries, to become legal assistants, to become case handlers, and ultimately, hopefully, qualify as property lawyers. And I have to say, since we've been doing that, we've obviously had a much higher staff retention level, because here there's no ceiling in terms of your job role. You can progress, and so on and so forth. And of course, it sort of helped the initial issue with finding good quality staff, qualified staff, and so on and so forth. But over the years, apart from sort of getting good staff, finding decent premises, of course, Brexit was still very difficult. And even now, I think back in the Christ, Brexit was very difficult. When they announced Brexit, you know, for a good 12 months after that, the market had definitely dipped. I'm still not so sure the market in London has fully recovered from that. So it'd be interesting what happens after the current sort of the current period to see where we are maybe this time next year. But Brexit, when they announced it, was also very difficult. It sort of petered out in the end, insofar as, you know, there were sort of so many delays. I think everybody got a bit bored in the end. But especially initially, people were very reluctant to commit. That, together with sort of stamp duty changes, did harm the investor arm of our practice. You know, we lost a lot of people that were looking to invest virtually overnight. So I would say probably the recession and Brexit were the two biggest, I suppose, difficulties that we faced.
And do you see any similarities in what's going on now to the recession back in 2008 or Brexit?
Well, there's less new matters, there's less completions, so there's similarities, but no, it's not the same. Whatever criticism we want to throw at the government, the furlough scheme that they have introduced must have massively helped most businesses. Certainly here we've been able to furlough staff that will hopefully take back. And of course, you know, the government are providing monies to them and ultimately kept their jobs open. Whereas with a recession, you don't know how long it's going to go on for, and literally there's no money, there's no pennies in the pot, unfortunately. So a recession is slightly different. I don't think the country will go into a recession after this current, you know, the current period in lockdown where we are. It does probably depend how long it goes on for, but if we're talking short term, I don't see a recession or anything that massively affects the property market. And the government have been very forthcoming in their views that, you know, estate agents should go back to work, and they have been encouraging, you know, every sort of person within the property industry to get back out there. And you know, I do think that the property market does have a bearing on the economy, and, you know, while the market's good, hopefully the economy will remain. And, you know, based on the fact that there hasn't been mass unemployment, there's not been a banking crisis before we locked down, hopefully things will come together, you know, fairly quickly. And I'm sort of clinging on to the hope that those that have been in lockdown, poor souls that have been sort of stuck in a one-bedroom flat, must be thinking, Christ, you know, I could really do with a garden, therefore I need to buy somewhere next year.
Well, I think that's almost the good thing for estate agents is, you know, whatever your view on it is if it's right to go back to work. It's funny, I just think, like, you know, do estate agents have some special vaccine that they've been given that they can go into people's houses and you know, and they're okay? But like you say, it's, you know, it's quite important that they do get back, and whether you like it or not, you know, you still got to work, you know. So you said earlier about you know, your team progressing through the ranks and there's been no ceiling for you. Obviously that means a change in role in terms of what you've done from when you first started. How's that adapted as you've grown from back in 2006 to where you are today?
Well, it's completely different. Back in 2006, I literally did everything from the banking to the wrapping the post, opening the post, to doing all the conveyancing. So it's totally different. My role now more involves overseeing the business in general. So I wouldn't particularly get involved in day-to-day matters and stuff like that. It's more sort of dealing with complex issues, compliance issues, and obviously, you know, sort of processes and sort of whether we can bring in different processes, different technology to aid the service we give. So I sort of work on the business more than working in the business, if that's a phrase to use.
I've definitely heard that before. That's good. And obviously, so what is it? 14 years you've had the company for now. How do you keep yourself motivated? Obviously, 14 years is a really, really long time to have your own business. How do you continue, you know, wake up every morning thinking, I'm going to push the company? How do you keep that mindset of, I want to keep striving for better when it has been such a long period of time? Or is it natural?
Well, it doesn't seem that long, to be honest with you. It doesn't seem like it's been, you know, to me, it seems like a few years back I started. I suppose ultimately seeing staff progress is a lovely thing to watch. You know, when I was sort of in their position, I didn't receive the training that perhaps I should have done and would have liked. And therefore, you know, we try and give the guys here as much training as they can take. The door's always open for anybody from, you know, whatever rank and division that's here. And of course, clients. And if we can introduce different processes, different services that can aid that move-in process. And, you know, when they say that the three most stressful things you do in life are death, divorce, and moving house, It's true. People are very stressed. It's a stressful time. Obviously, I've done it myself, and you'd think I wouldn't get stressed, but of course you do. It's so personal that it becomes so stressful, and because of the exaggerated amount of time it takes, that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
So if we can help clients have a slicker transition from when they see something they like to moving in, then yeah, it keeps driving you forward.
Yeah, cool. And how do you you mentioned earlier about obviously having the better staff. How do you differentiate yourself from the next firm who's doing the same thing? Because I think, like I said earlier, it's just a process that you need to follow. So how do you as a company differentiate yourself from the next company down the road who's in the same area, who has the same amount of marketing or whatever it is? How do you make yourself look different?
We try and emphasize communication with clients. So, we use WhatsApps, we do text messaging, we have case trackers, as well as emails and regular phone calls. So everything we do is aimed at service to clients.
Yeah.
I don't really look at what other local firms or national firms do, to be honest with you. I'm sure there's loads and loads and loads of good practices out there.
Yeah.
And I've got friends that run other law firms, that are highly successful. But for us, the ethos of what we do all started around the service that we give our clients. We're a family-run practice, so that's almost our USP. It's all about the service for us, and that's what sort of drives you forward.
Yeah.
And that's probably what differentiates us and what we strive for. We strive to slightly disrupt the market in that we're not just looking through a lease or an old conveyance, looking for its legal context. It's trying to apply that legal context to a practical position as well.
Yeah.
And whilst we need to be highly due diligent in the advice we give to our clients, it's equally as important to realise that they're moving. They're undertaking, one of the biggest transactions they're ever likely to do. And
yeah.
I think people on average move, is it 6-7 times during their lifetime as a national average?
Yeah, I think so.
So they don't do it that often. So, it's trying to make it as seamless as possible for them. And it's very difficult with the red tape, with the different procedures and the different bodies that are involved. Let's not beat around the bush. It is difficult, but that's what we strive to do. And that's why, we have sort of a team that work on the files. Every case handler here has an assistant and a secretary, so that if one's busy, the others can jump in.
Yeah.
We've got numerous backup staff. We have a new business department, a post-completion department that try and take a lot of the admin away from the case handling guys, so they can be on the phone more often rather than worry about a quote that's got to go out, following that up, or a registration, and so on and so forth.
It sounds like you've got a pretty well-oiled machine there. How many staff have you got now?
We had 121.
Wow.
Yeah, we had 121. But obviously at the moment there's only a few of us knocking about. But yeah, so measuring sort of staff equaling success isn't always a great gauge.
Yeah.
I'm not saying by having lots of staff it equals any kind of success at all. However, we feel that we need the staff to service the clients.
Yeah.
Invariably, by pushing our guys to get on that phone and speak to clients, it obviously means that when other clients are ringing in, stands to reason that those guys could be on the phone.
Yeah.
So we need these teams to be able to take calls, to communicate, through our case tracker website, email, whatever the case may be. So the communication is key, and we need to drive that forward.
Yeah, I think that's the point that I was trying to get at, is that you've got such a large team, and by the sounds of it, and from what I know when I've been into your office, it is very customer focused.
Yeah,
I think it is really easy to forget that. Obviously, you're doing a job. Your fee earners may have a certain amount of cases that they're dealing with. The person that's actually on the other end, the person moving home, it is one of the biggest purchases of their life that they might only do a few times in life, and to them it means the world. And I think for estate agents, for solicitors, for anyone involved in the moving process, it can be easily forgotten. I think that people are moving home, and it means a lot to them. And I think that's partly, why you have grown so successful, is because obviously you've kept that at the focus and the core of your company, and grown that, which is really good to see. So what does the future hold for a company like yours? Do you plan to go, do you plan to grow national, like you're going further up north, or?
Well, we already carry out conveyancing all over the UK, so we can act for anybody from any one of our offices, wherever they may be buying. across England and Wales. There's no particular designs at the moment to open any additional offices. We were potentially looking to slightly expand the number of case handlers that we had pre-lockdown. Yeah. But I think at the moment it's just a case of, you know, seeing how the market returns. Fingers crossed it comes back to normal until this time next year. This is just something that we're down the pub having a pint and, you know, just talking about, Christ, can you remember that lockdown period? But yeah. So fingers crossed it comes back. So at the moment there's no designs to do anything more than we're doing. And it's just a constant evolving job to look at the processes that we undertake and trying to improve them on a regular basis. But I think at the moment there isn't really too many people out there in business that can really forecast too much, as nobody knows what's going to be happening over the next sort of few months.
I think, like you said earlier, it's just about riding the wave and making sure you are alert to what's going on so you can adapt to it. That's amazing. So what if there's a law firm just starting out, what advice would you give if you're just starting out? Maybe forget about the old COVID situation. If it was a few months back and they were just starting out, what would you say to them?
Pretty much what we just spoke about. I think people get obsessed by spending fortunes on tech. Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. However, the clients will respond equally to receiving a telephone call and a text message or an email. The clients aren't craving the tech our end. We see the tech our end, which is fantastic. However, the clients are quite happy with the personal service. Yeah. So I think, it's getting a good grasp of the regulation, whether that's CLC or SRA, and the Law Society, making sure that you've got lots of contacts, as it's a difficult period ahead with regards to lender panels, indemnity insurance applications, and so on and so forth. So, if anybody is ever thinking about starting up, always drop me a line. I'll be always happy to give any advice if it's of value. I'm not saying I know everything, but if it's of any value and I could always help, then I'll be pleased to do so. But at the end of the day, owning your own company, being able to drive that service forward is a great opportunity and a great thing.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I think that's what I was going to end up on is how do people get in touch with you if they want to ask any questions or if they want to use you to move home? What's the best way to get in touch?
Best way to get in touch is just to ping me an email, which is Stuart, stuart.f@pcslegal.co.uk. Ping me an email or give me a call at our Basildon office, which is 01268 59003.
Amazing. Well, Stu, thank you so much. It's so good to get an insight into, I guess, a firm of your size and the journey it took to get there. Because I think it's so easy to see what you've done and where you are at the moment. That people, it's something that I never really thought about. I've always known you're a Stu, owner of PCS Legal, and I never really thought about what it's taken you to get up there. So it's really good to get insight into that. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing what PCS holds for the next years to come.
No problems. Take care.